can't be happening here at St. Olaf. I don't believe it. And you have to say, it is happening here. The student just told me the story in my last class. So, my name is Maria Kelly, and I teach in the education department. I currently serve as chair of the department. This is my 13th year of teaching. For the most part, St. Olaf tries to adhere to its mission and tries really hard to provide the best possible experience for the students. I think that there's a lot of room for growth. And so that's my hope for St. Olaf, is that it continues to be reflective and think about the kind of experience that it's offering all of its students. I think that one of my frustrations has been when I was a student here, when some of my friends found out that I was accepted at St. Olaf, they teased me and said, well, then the only reason why you're going to St. Olaf is because you're a minority and they need a quota, and it's not because you're a good student. And that was very difficult to hear. And oftentimes I would wonder, am I here just because I'm a student of color, or did I get to come here because I really am a good student? And it saddens me that now, 30-some years later, there's still students that think that will say to students of color here, you're only here because you're a student of color, not because you're a good student, or you're here because they need a quota or something like that. And it's either something that's said directly to some students, or it's a feeling, or something that's communicated in the atmosphere, that there's the regular Oles, and then there's the rest of you all over here that are special and get special treatment. And that makes me sad that that's the same as when I was a student many, many years ago. That hasn't changed. Think about it in terms of privilege. I think there is a large group of students that will come to St. Olaf and no one will question their being here, and they'll be treated a certain way and deferred to a certain way because they fit the stereotypical idea of what we think of as an Ole. And then there are all these other folks who either are already insecure and questioning themselves, and then somehow get that sort of reinforcement from other students or from the professors that they may work with. Students of color sometimes are put into awkward positions during class where they're asked to be, for all intents and purposes, like a spokesperson for their race or their ethnic group, or there's this awkward tension around it, and either the professor doesn't want to talk about it, or doesn't know how to talk about it, or doesn't notice it. But I have had enough students tell me that they have been made to feel uncomfortable in their classes at times. Yeah, and again, I don't think it needs to be that big of a deal. A couple years ago, maybe more than a couple years ago, St. Olaf decided to do this whole big thing on vocation. That was like the new word and the new thing. And they figured out a way where every single first-year student met with a faculty member, and we had this workshop on vocation, and we talked about stuff, and we sort of had this conversation with students, and it was a way, I think, of the college community saying to the student, this is important enough for every single first-year student to have this conversation. I mean, it took a lot of planning and a lot of effort to make that happen. And so it seems to me that you could do something similar like that around race or around class, where you could have every single student at St. Olaf and every single faculty member and every single staff member be challenged and to give thought and consideration and some personal work to, who am I in this community? How am I being perceived? What are some ways I could change my behaviors to help all students feel welcome at St. Olaf? But that hasn't happened. I haven't seen anything like that. One of the courses that we offer in our department is called Multicultural Education in Hawaii. And I took that group one year, and I've heard from students who've taken it other years, that one of the most powerful components of the program for Caucasian students is finding themselves in situations in which they are the minority, perhaps for the first time in their life. And it's a very powerful and eye-opening experience for them, because I think they begin to see and understand and feel what it must be like to be the recipient of the stares and the microaggression and the negativity and the assumptions made about who they are and what they're about based purely on appearance. And that's one of those things that is, I think, a tremendous benefit from participating in that program. And so I think that if there would be some way for the community to have a kind of experience or an opportunity to have conversation about what is it like to be the other, or to stand out, or to be perceived as different, or to have so many assumptions made about you without anybody really getting to know you first. Well, recently we had a panel, and it was a couple of us professors, and then the vice president of admissions, and the president. And we were asked different questions and things like that. I think it would be great to have a panel of students, and to have students hear from the panel, and faculty and administration hear from the panel related to their various experiences. And they need not all be negative, but a panel of students who in multiple ways embody the other, so I think race is such an important issue in and of itself that can stand alone and just be the one thing that is addressed. I think there have been efforts made to make the campus much more welcoming to LGBTQ students, for example, but certainly that could be a panel of what is that experience like, or one focused on gender or religious diversity. I think there'd be a lot of different configurations that you can have. And I don't mean it to be, I'll borrow from one of my students, he called it the oppression club. I don't mean it to be like that, where everyone's oppressed. But I do think that when people start to hear those stories, like some of the ones you've been telling me that you've heard, it causes people to pause. Because sometimes when I've shared these stories with colleagues, they're shocked. And they say, oh, that can't be happening here at St. Olaf. I don't believe it. And you have to say, it is happening here. The student just told me the story in my last class, so I know that it's recent. And I think if they were to hear it from the students themselves, that would be really powerful. So I think as much as there can be student voice in these experiences, I think that would be really important. Mm-hmm. I know I challenged a few of my students to get on the curriculum committee. There's always students on that committee, and I think that enough students have expressed frustration with the multicultural requirements and other components of the curriculum at St. Olaf. So I said, well, get on the committee, because we have students there, and that'd be one way to effect change. I think that acts of protest and demonstrations and things like that are excellent ways to teach people and bring awareness. But until the bureaucracy changes, you might as well join in on the party, right? And get on the student senate and get in leadership positions and on committees, so that you can work with the existing structure to effect change that way. I would say both and. Keep up with the demonstrations and the panels and the discussions and the films. All that stuff is really good to bring awareness. But at the same time, also make sure that their students are inserting themselves into the structure so that they can be seen and heard. I know there have been a few occasions where, through the Student Life Committee, a few students have made a presentation to the full faculty meeting. And that's unusual, and it's usually pretty effective and powerful. I mean, you have most everyone there, including the administration. And so as a platform, as an opportunity to express concern or something to the faculty, that, you know, that's an opportunity that I don't see too many students taking advantage of. Well, I think that there's some things that are in place in the curriculum that need to be strengthened. For example, I served on the curriculum committee for a few years, and because of academic freedom, there are certain guidelines you have to have in place. Let's say if you want to teach a GE or if you want to teach a certain kind of a class, there are expectations that you'll have these different things, but it's not so prescriptive down to, and here's the vocabulary and here's the methodology and things like that. But related to the multicultural domestic requirement, I do think that there could be a little bit more of a stricter guideline for professors as far as any course that gets this GE attached to it has to make sure it covers these basic components, or this, you know, critical race theory, or these sorts of vocabulary words, that's a vital part of the course. And I think that there are somewhat similar strong attributes to some of the other GEs, but I think this one would need to be just a little bit more heavy-handed to ensure that, again, I think it's a message that the college is saying to its student body when it says, we expect you to have a course in this before you graduate. I think that's a pretty strong message. We're saying this is important. So it should be something that, not that everyone has to have the identical class, but that everyone is equipped with an awareness and a vocabulary and some theory to help them process the social part of going to college and the interactions in staff or in your dorm or out on the quad, that it's also given an academic context. And I think the feedback I've gotten from students in the courses that I've taught for the Race and Ethnic Studies department have said, we wish we could talk about this stuff in our other classes too. So I think that there's a desire and an interest in the student body right now to talk more about it and to understand it, and not just on the part of the students of color, but I think everyone is sensing this is important and we should be talking about it. And I wish that it was something that was, you know, institutionalized a little bit more. At least that's the feedback I've been given. So I think that's one way that St. Olaf could do it, would be to take a really good look at the curriculum next year and have some very important conversations about what does it mean when we say that a student is getting that multicultural domestic GE? What do we know is going to happen for that student, or what are some of the things we can expect the student will learn? And then outside of the classroom, I think being willing to support those sorts of events and allow for the kind of climate where students feel empowered to have events like Authentic Oles or any of the other things that have happened. Last year, the Race Matters campaign, for example, where students felt empowered and felt like they could speak and share what their experiences were. But again, I do think that part of it is some professional development. I think that training for faculty and staff needs to happen in a way that communicates St. Olaf is really serious about increasing diversity, not just bringing people to campus, but once they're here, making sure that they have the best experience possible and really feel truly welcomed and really feel like they are a part of the community just as much as anyone else. I think there needs to be communication and a commitment on the part of the college that says, we are really committed to this and we're ready to do whatever it takes. And that might mean professional development for faculty and staff. That might mean workshop sessions for all first years when they come, like we did with that vocation thing, or the Covadis thing that they do for sophomores, that we're communicating this is important and we expect people to have a certain level of discourse about these things and move away from those microaggressions or even the full-on out aggressive racism and things like that people have experienced here in Canada.